Naruto vs Ichigo. In the grand scheme of shonen matchups, there isn't any other battle quite like this one. People have been willing to spend tens of thousands of dollars to see it come to life, wasted countless precious hours in research or debate to put an end to the madness, and most of all, they've been scouring the internet for as long as it's existed to find any opinion that differs from their own, even slightly, in an attempt to bring down the collective wrath of humanity upon whoever would claim their favorite character hasn't been an extra-dimensional god since Chapter 1. But in the heat of the conflict, it's gone on for almost as long as they've been around. It seems both sets of fans, after a certain point, have begun to overlook one crucial detail that flips this matchup completely on its head. Naruto and Ichigo didn't just stop growing at the end of their series in 2014 and 2016, respectively. While so many people were laser focused on the battle between the two protagonists at their most divine, almost a decade of beats, lore, and scaling has slipped right under their noses. So today, we're gonna talk about it. What happens when two heroes of shonen reach the end of their journey? Do greater ceilings of power really exist for them beyond that final chapter? Or were the prophecies of enemies above even the gods destined to bring them both to ruin? Regardless of your thoughts on this classic matchup, after looking at everything we know about both in the modern era, one thing becomes very clear, and it's that adult Naruto versus adult Ichigo isn't close. Now, when discussing a topic as toxic and heavily debated as Naruto vs Ichigo, no matter what the form or context, one of the most important factors is having all the facts straight that have been established over these years of discussion. And while this video in particular is exclusively talking about the adult forms of these two, I think it's important to give you that baseline of where they might have been at the end of their series, from the lower end to the highball metas and everything in between, so you can kind of get a grasp on what sort of stats these two were rocking before entering the new gen era. And to do this, I think the easiest method is to just give you 3 quick interpretations for each, but if you want a little more information on any of this, just check out the rest of our channel. We've got some more videos about both of them. In the case of speed though, each of them have 3 easily definable light speed metas, so at the absolute worst, Naruto would reach these light speeds during his fight with Ten Tails Madara due to dodging his Sage Art Light Fang, which is a casual attack that, like all other Sage techniques, is composed of a natural element, which in this case would mean it's made of light. And for Ichigo, the same is pretty true for the Ashwaubenon Light, an attack used by Yuha which was capable of tagging multiple top-tier Quincy's, that is, pretty much in every sense of the word, designed to be actual light, with Ichigo scaling to a far stronger Soul King Yuha, which would obviously make him much faster than the Ashwaubenon. As you can expect though, these low-ball metas are very inconsistent with what the rest of the series shows us, so let's go ahead and quickly look at what their more consistent median arguments would be. The Naruto databooks make claims about multiple Kage class characters having lightspeed attacks. The Raikage A is stated to possess lightspeed reactions on panel, with Naruto himself being capable of blitzing said perception back in the far weaker KCM1 state, and you add all that on top of the fact that an 8th gate guy was capable of bending and warping space around him, despite being far slower than Ten Tails Madara, or even just potentially base Minato's reaction speed if you're charitable, then you can easily make a case for those 6 paths characters being far faster than light. And for the Bleach side, the idea of the Negation, which is seen as early as the 2nd arc, acting as this sort of powerful light meant to save Hollows from Soul Reapers, as well as Aranjiro, the weakest member of the Espada, a group of said Hollows, being able to dodge actual light beams on panel, on top of just a general lack of other quantifiable anti-feats, could easily scale any early Captain Class Shinigami from the start of the series to well above light speed. But of course, for the absolute smooth brain arguments about speed scaling for them, if you look at Haku from all the way back in the first arc of the series, he is stated and shown to move through lightspeed reflections in his ice mirrors, which would be perfectly consistent with the medium meta presented above, as he is supposed to be a pretty powerful character who remains relevant deep into the war arc. But if you just ignore that context of Haku holding back on Kid Naruto, and instead just look at the Knucklehead Ninja casually one-tapping the OP Ice Dude, with databook statements like Part 1 Kakashi blocking lightspeed attacks to loosely support the idea, then you could maybe say that the Naruto-verse goes far deeper into the lightspeed scale, potentially into the MFTL ranges. with a pretty similar thing being true for Ichigo, who, during his own first arc, blocked a Sero, being this magic red beam thing, from a Minos Grande, which is often claimed by Bleach fans to be a definitive source of light speed, since it sort of looks like light and is called light in some places. And if you ignore the fact that Bala is stated faster than Sero and has the exact same visuals, debunking the notion of it being light speed due to visuals, as well as then maybe lowballing Aranero to get him below start of series Ichigo somehow, then you could honestly maybe argue that Ichigo, as soon as he picks up his sword, should consistently be in those light speed ranges. And while yes, you could keep going back and forth about all this for a while, all that really matters here is saying both characters have lightspeed metas from all across their series, and should probably just upscale from it equally no matter what point you're looking at. With Naruto maybe having a slight edge since he has precognition, and Ichigo does not. Fortunately for us though, the usual culprit of all nerd debate, the ours is bigger than yours AP measuring contest, is surprisingly less of a thing for the Naruto Ichigo fight than most others. Because while there's always going to be your detractors and people who just can't read, for the most part there are really only two commonly accepted metas with Naruto and Ichigo that basically only come down to one thing. How big exactly do you think the realms are in each series? Yuha was threatening 3 realms, and Kaguya actually destroyed a realm on panel, making it pretty cut and dry that as the 2 strongest enemies of their classic series, that through some simple power scaling, it would imply however OP we can justify said feats to be is where the protag duo would logically scale. And while I could try to explain the nuances between the 2 choices or why one is more valid than the other in my own mind, since if you're gonna say the Bleach dimensions are these massive separate universal time spaces containing stars and other cosmic structures as your evidence, then Kaguya's dimensions, which are also shown and described the exact same way, would also be universal. And if you think these dimensions are just more like big planets, since that's basically all we see of them, then go figure they'd both scale to that instead. Since these 2 literally almost share the exact same best feat, just throw a dart. The only major difference to note in their classic scaling is that Ichigo should maybe scale a bit higher into said power level than Naruto, as while Naruto did struggle to keep up with Kaguya's OP stats, Ichigo consistently kept up with Yuha until he began literally altering the future, to the point that we still don't even really know what his true Bankai does, because he didn't even feel the need to use it against the base form Quincy King. But like I said at the start of this, we aren't here to be getting involved in that nuclear garbage fire of a matchup. These stats are all just some very general baselines for where Naruto and Ichigo can be scaled to before we ever really touch on what kind of progress they've made in recent years. But since that is sort of what this video is about, and because most people don't even know that Ichigo has a canon continuation to his story outside of the final chapter, let's go ahead and start with Naruto's progression first, since, for better or worse, the majority of anime fans seem to know the ups and downs of his unfortunate end. And this starts all the way back at November 24th, 2014, where we would see the release of chapter 699 of the Naruto manga, which, to some, could be seen as the unofficial ending of the series, as this chapter marks the end of the 4th Great Shinobi War, the return of Sasuke to Konoha, and even a nice little mini time skip. From there though, 3 major sources would try to continue the story from that point on, which would be Naruto Retsuden, as well as the other light novels, Naruto the Last, plus the other time material related to it, and Naruto Chapter 700, which can just encompass everything else in the Boruto era. The first of these chronologically, Naruto the Last, is set 2 years after the events of Shippuden, and follows the events of how Naruto ended up marrying Hinata. By proxy, it kinda gives us the least to go off of for Naruto's progression, with the only things that really occurred during this time for Naruto's scaling being his new arm, which is comprised entirely of these stamina-roiding, wood-style granting Hashirama cells, the fact that he got the other half of Kurama, making him half a Nine-Tails stronger for free, and of course the fact that he had 2 free years of training since the Kaguya fight. And for those of you who buy into the lower metas, this movie does support that notion, with Naruto basically one-shotting someone who is gonna destroy the Earth, as well as a few other moon-level feats sprinkled in on the side. For those of you who buy the higher metas on the other hand, The most interesting thing to note here then would be the outside sources implying Toneri to be a threat beyond Kaguya, which if true would basically imply Naruto was already one shot diff above Kaguya by the last, long before the Boruto era, but I personally don't think that's a super accurate interpretation due to how much Momoshiki is built up as the threat greater than Kaguya. And it would then make it pretty irrelevant if everyone had already managed this Kaguya level and beyond threat almost a decade ago. After the last though, we've got the Naruto light novels, and people always have a lot of contention when these things are brought into play, due to the wacky translation issues and just general idea of them never being brought up again within canon. These things are seriously self-contained as far as I know, but the only reason I bring them up is basically just to say that they don't matter. Sure, a sick chakraless Naruto manages to dodge a light beam, and maybe if you don't care about those translation issues, Momoshiki could threaten a whole solar system or something. But in reality, the feats of Kaguya and Yuha could already be calced to wherever you really needed them to be to make this irrelevant. Be it star level, solar system, galaxy, or whatever, realm destroying on its own is just so inconsistent that it can be honestly used to justify any meta with the right argument. So yeah, that's all to say, just ignore the Naruto light novels for now, and you'll thank yourself for avoiding the headache. Which just leaves us with the even bigger headache to most, the Boruto era. And this final stop on our mini Naruto hype train is definitely a bit of a mixed bag, because on the one hand it easily gives us the most context into Naruto's overall strength as an adult, with 5 major fights, a bevy of other statements, and 84 total chapters of additional context at the time of writing this. But for the sake of the video though, all of that basically just amounts to 3 of those fights and whatever context we really got for them, since Boruto isn't especially known for its consistency or proper treatment of legacy characters. In the first fight of relevance, Naruto vs Momoshiki, we pretty much get most of the important information to know about the 7th Hokage in a power scaling sense, because Momoshiki is confirmed to be the threat greater than Kaguya numerous times. And said greater threat than Kaguya, after already absorbing another Otsutsuki, I might add, basically gets packed up by a 1-2 combo, from a 50% power Naruto and a 50% power Sasuke. This is all incredibly significant because of Naruto's next 2 fights, where we meet the strongest Otsutsuki, until he wasn't anymore, named Jigen. Now, up to this point, it's been pretty consistent that between getting another half of the QB, training for over a decade, and getting those sweet Hashirama cells, Naruto got quite a bit stronger as the protector of the world. But that all came to a screeching halt with Jigen, who basically showed up, fought full-powered Naruto and Sasuke, then completely throttled them, with basically the modern narrator of the verse, named Amato, saying Naruto and Sasuke put together barely stood a chance against him. And that same Jigen then proceeds to power up into his actual true form called Ishiki, and Ishiki went from being a debatably beatable villain for the cast to a literal god who Sasuke and Naruto both agree all they can really do against is get unalived. Keep in mind, these are the same Naruto and Sasuke who had battled through a Kaguya level gap before his teens, without ever really even doubting their victory. But the perceived gap between their adult selves and Ishiki was so massive that Naruto is just straight up like, "Sorry Kurama, I guess I'm dead now." Which makes it all the more impressive when Naruto whips out his ultimate Super Giga Chad capstone form called Baryon Mode, which is basically what it says on the tin. Get your protagonist powers back for 5 minutes guaranteed, side effects may vary. But in the broad scope of the anime world, I feel like this form is downplayed way too much for the reasons I mentioned above. Just looking at the simple math here, if we say Kaguya with her Yuha-esque feat is a 1 on the scale, and we call fused Momoshiki, Naruto, and Sasuke a 2 for being double that, then Jigen, who's stronger than the fusion of Naruto and Sasuke's power, should logically be a 4, and if we double it again for Ishiki, since his power was considered unfathomable compared to Jigen, plus another double for Naruto's Baryon transformation, then we can easily get Baryon mode to a 10 or 20 times multiplier without ever using any brain power at all. Which means that, by the end of Boruto, we have a Naruto who could one-shot his adult self, while that same adult self who just got one shot could make Kaguya catch hands, with that still being the same Kaguya who nearly managed to solo a 6-path Sam's Team 7 all the way back in 2014. So, with Naruto's massive gains, I'm sure you're all kinda curious now about what kind of progress Ichigo could possibly have made to compete. And well, I think that's sort of why most people haven't or won't cover this version of the matchup yet, because unlike Naruto, who did get a full sequel manga, novels, and a feature-length film about his older life, Ichigo basically just gets like 4 light novels and a 72-page bonus chapter to kick off the quote-unquote Hell arc. Why this is a problem is because the light novels, as we mentioned with Naruto, are kind of notoriously inconsistent, as none of them have actually been written by the original author, Tite Kubo, and the information we actually have gotten in the manga canon often sort of brings into question or just outright contradicts what we read about in the novel. In the case of Bleach in particular, we have multiple interviews from the authors of both major novelizations, We Do Not Always Love You and Can't Fear Your Own World, basically telling us that Kubo gave them the information to make the novels because Jump pulled the plug on Bleach. The problem with this is that we don't exactly know what information is Kubo canon, so to speak. Very much a Dragon Ball Super-esque problem where details and facts are shared between continuities, but some things are altered between the final releases. The reason I bring this up is because unlike Naruto, who remained 100% on an Otsutsuki level of power in every piece of follow-up media, towards the very end of the Blood War arc, as most Bleach fans would know, Ichigo got straight up nerfed, with Yuha, the Quincy King, basically revoking his powers like he did with all the other Quincy's, which resulted in a very screwed up Zanpakuto and no more Quincy abilities for the ginger-haired hero, which by proxy would remove his Horn of Salvation mode that needed those powers to work. And while it would be a little unfair of me to say Naruto didn't lose anything in the transition out of protagonist status, all the things Naruto actually lost, so to speak, are just things we haven't seen him ever use again. Meaning he could feasibly just still be an idiot like he always was and have somehow forgotten about things like Boil Release, Truth Seeker Orbs, and whatever else I might have missed from back then. But in Ichigo's case, just looking at the manga, his sword never visually went back to normal, and he's literally only fought one person since then, being this random feetless demon thing. The novels, however, do make it pretty clear that Ichigo got all his powers back, unlike the other Quincy's, and if we take this at face value, he should definitely be a lot stronger. However, going back to the canon stuff again, Ichigo is just as afraid as everyone else of Yuha's return, and doesn't exactly seem super keen on fighting the Hell Ants of Vileporo. And honestly, that's kinda why I don't think this matchup is all that close. Because on the one hand, if we just look at the manga adaptations of the characters and forget everything from the classic series or supplementary material, then Ichigo is nerfed beyond belief, having spent most of his time skip living a regular family life without Quincy powers. Whereas Naruto somehow just surpassed Kaguya off screen while sitting in his office. Which, for a fight between two characters this heavily debated about, would probably be enough to seal the deal in Naruto's favor. And if you're in the opposite camp, trying to take all the light novels, author statements, and lore surrounding the two of them at face value, then Naruto vaguely surpassed characters beyond Kaguya, while Ichigo still seems kind of hesitant to take on a revived Yuha. Even saying that would still make the two of them equals or close, since we have already established the realm-busting feats to be vaguely the same, with neither of them really having any other great feats to gauge off of, Naruto still got a new form that literally punches the lifespan out of people. And Life Force is outright stated to be the building blocks for a Soul Reaper's power. So to me, it only really seems sort of logical that with Kubo remaining the sole creator of Bleach, we just really have barely any content or context on what adult Ichigo can actually do, compared to adult Naruto, who Kishimoto handed off to another author permanently, which just gave him way more time to gather up new feats and run the series straight into the ground. So if you think the classic fight is close at all, then Hokage Naruto should probably win by what we know. And if you thought this fight was a stomp before, then refer back to what you thought about 20 minutes ago, since like I said, we hardly know anything about modern Ichigo. Also, if you do want to be really pedantic, yes, Naruto lost Kurama, everything after that point is a clear stomp for Ichigo, duh. If you just really want to see a follow-up where I dive headfirst into the full Flame War though and discuss those classic forms at length, or just a part 2 of this when the Hell Arc finally gets underway, hit that big red button down below for me to let me know, since we're trying to hit 1K subs by the end of the year, and by now we're so close that I can practically taste it. Regardless of that though, I hope you enjoyed, and that's all for today. Thanks. Everything.